Hello, everyone. Before we get started, I'm going to just do a quick announcement. Workshop 35 and 34 is canceled. And then just before we get started with the program, we're going to have Hannah Coyle come on stage, and then we're going to do a group photo of everyone. If you're feeling shy and don't want to be in the picture, just use your fan and just cover your face. All right, so if you want to do a clapping one, that'd be great. So everybody, let's clap. Yay. And then if you could stand up and clap and cheer, that would be great. Yes, you can do it. Let's get up. Woo! MACMA conference. Awesome. Hannah, is that good? All right, thanks everybody. Okay. All right. So, as you all notice, I am, what? Oh, which workshop? Yep, yeah, so it's workshop 35 and workshop 45. All right, so. Okay, so as you all can see, I'm wearing an exclusive MACMA fanny pack. It's a one-of-a-kind. So we're gonna do a silent auction at the green tent in the deck arena, so make your bid, it's one of a kind. So I just wanted to share that. We're gonna have Chrissy from Move Mindfully to start us off with a mindful movement, and then we'll get started with the program. Thanks, everybody.
So I am Chrissy McNona with Move Mindfully, lead trainer and director of education. And it is a good idea to move your body just to get ready for this session. So I'm going to invite you right now just to stretch any way that you want to in your chair. You most likely just ate lunch, so we want to wake you up a little bit. And just moving your body can help you be ready to listen and enjoy this amazing presentation. I am going to share two simple mind-body strategies that are Chris and Shar approved. So one that can be really settling if you're feeling anxious or stressed is hands on top of your head or behind your head or simply holding your head. And this just brings blood flow back to your brain. It's an easy way to remind yourself that you're safe if you're feeling stressed or anxious. If none of these feel comfortable for you, just doing this is a way to calm your mind and body as well. Another really easy strategy when we do feel overwhelmed or stressed is to simply tap. And you can really tap anywhere. It's just bringing your mind and body back here, so that you can really listen and learn and enjoy this amazing story you're about to hear. Another simple strategy is just a big sigh, just taking a big breath. So I'm going to invite you to do that with me. Take a big breath in and a big breath out. And let's do that again together. So as you listen to this amazing keynote, you might need to take a big breath now and again, or bring that safety back to your body, settle any big emotions that you might be having. And another way we can use our mind-body connection to feel ready to do the work that's in front of us is to simply focus on your inner resources. Inner resources are something we have within us all the time that we can invite into our day to support us in the joys and challenges that we might face. So I'm going to invite us all collectively to draw on our inner resource of hope. And hope reminds us that positive change is coming. And I think when you listen to this keynote, you're going to know that positive change is coming. So thank you and enjoy.
Thank you so much, Chrissy. All right, let's get started with the program. So welcome to the Monday keynote. Thank you all for being here. My name is Amanda Zhang, and I'm the Professional Development Director here at the Minnesota Association for Children's Mental Health. It's been such an honor and privilege to organize this conference for you all people, so thank you all for being here. At this point, I want to sincerely thank our sponsors. Without them, hosting a conference of this scale would not be possible. Our gold sponsors are Allina Health and North Holmes Children and Family Services. Our silver sponsors are Rogers Behavioral Health, Blue Cross Blue Shield and Blue Plus of Minnesota, and Nexus Family Healing. And our bronze sponsor is Perry St. John's. Thank you to each of you for supporting all of us 1,400 attendees. So it's a lot of us here. This is really great, so thank you. Now I am so honored to introduce our speakers. Dr. Charlene Michael-Bust is the Executive Director of EQ Learn and Stoneark Learning, companies that provide in-person and online professional development opportunities for school districts and mental health professionals. Most of her career has been as a regular and special education teacher. Dr. Michael-Bust has been a loyal partner with MACMA, presenting at numerous of our conferences. She is an advocate for restorative practices for youth and is an education and mental health specialist with Live More, Screen Less, a youth-centered digital mental wellness company. She will be joined by Christopher Fausto Cabrera, who is an independent consultant with C. Fausto Cabrera Consulting. He was incarcerated for 21 years at Stillwater Correctional Facility, where he taught writing and art classes to fellow inmates. He became a passionate restorative justice advocate, and in early 2024, his sentence was commuted by the Minnesota Pardons Board. Let's give a round of a warm welcome to Dr. Michael-Bust and Christopher.
Why don't I do this? This is supposed to be on, isn't it? We have lapel mics, so I guess we don't need three between us. So, hi MACMA attendees. It's such an honor to be here this afternoon to present with my esteemed co-presenter, Christopher Cabrera. And we'll just give a brief introduction of ourselves. As Amanda said, and thank you, Amanda, I have been involved in education, mental health, restorative justice, alternatives to incarceration, elimination of practices that exclude and punish children. And my current work is actually along that same vein. And this is my co-presenter, Christopher Fausto Cabrera.
My name is Chris. I publish under C. Fausto, and I'm a kid that slipped through the cracks. So I landed hard, and I had to figure out how to get back up. So I became an artist, a writer, and I found restorative justice principles and practices through advantageous turn, but I landed in the right way. It brought me to Shar, and Shar gave me a sense of purpose and how to put that into action. So thank you for having me, and we're excited to tell our story today.
Yes, we are. So we're going to start with a little bit of background about my family. I did have a son named Paul, and you'll hear a bit about what happened with him 11 years ago. And behind Paul is his niece, Shay, my granddaughter. And then in the next picture is Paul with his sister, Angela, and their dog, Gato. And those of you who speak Spanish know the irony in that, the Spanish word for cat. And this is Rich, Paul, Shar, and Angie. So that's our family. So what happened to Paul is very tragic and sad.
In news this morning, the search will continue today on Medicine Lake for a missing Twin Cities man. 31-year-old Paul Michael-Bust and another man were kayaking on Medicine Lake early Saturday morning. When the kayak flipped, the other person made it to shore, but Paul did not. Rachel Zobick has been following this story, and obviously a big search has been underway.
Still don't quite know why that no one called police.
I understand there's still that gap in time, right?
Foul play is suspected.
The reality of the situation as may becomes clear.
And we have some late-breaking news in the search for missing kayaker Paul Michael Bus.
Have been searching for 3 days. Stanek just confirmed that they did find the body. The family is here at the scene learning new information about the case, and they are going to hold a vigil nearby. However, they have requested privacy.
Find it, a rainbow connection, the lovers, the dreamers, and me.
Paul would be entertained to know that he's being called a kayaker, because I think he went kayaking once, and unfortunately, it was that day. But now he's a kayaker, so I hope he appreciates that. So there was lack of closure after that incident. The person of interest in this case, who we believed harmed Paul, did not report him missing, and in fact went to bed after the kayak ride, and Paul never came back to shore. He hired an attorney prior to the dive team locating my son's body. He refused to give his cell phone to the police, and he would not tell our family what happened. So I approached him by the lakeside and said, "What happened?" And he wouldn't speak to me. And I had a victim advocate in Hennepin County, and they said, "We know that your son was murdered." And now Chris.
My story starts out a long time ago. I was 6 when I first went to Stillwater. My mom fell in love with the dirtbag, and here we were every week making the drive to Stillwater. And oddly enough, those were my most fond times with my mom. And his journey was similar to many of the roles like you'd see in Scarface. He came over on the Marinelle boat lift, and he needed to get sponsorship in order to get out of the prison. Otherwise, he'd be sent to a detention camp. So he called my mom, they established a relationship, and then they got married in Stillwater in order for him to come out. He ran with, outlaw Cubans, and so I grew up kind of emulating that and seeing that that's my mother's type. He didn't stick around too long. That picture right there is of my little brother. He left not too long after that. And then a couple years, she died of cancer, and I was lost. I retreated inward. I was 12 years old. She was 32. And for me, that was the pivot. That was the point. Like, I look back now and see, and this is 92, so pre-mental health days, pre-depression era, and in our culture, we didn't think to go ask for help or, speak to a therapist or, have money to even go and explore such options. So luckily, my Aunt Kathy and my Uncle Steve saved us from foster care, and they stepped in and they were there for us, and they did the best they could, but that connection was just never the same. And it's not an excuse. Recently, when I got out, my aunt gave me a bag of my mother's possessions, and they were her final possessions. And I'm talking about, like, this was a week ago. So forgive me for, stumbling through this, but she had this little mirror, and in the mirror, you'd open it up, and it was my baby picture in it. And then there's this picture of this random dude. And at first, like, my aunt was like, oh, this is just, she must have not switched out or had time. And I'm like, okay, I take it. And then the other part is a mirror. So I take it home and, you know, I think about it, I'm contemplating it, and, you know, it dawned on me that this was like, you know, my mother's final thoughts about who I would become. Like, who would the man I would become? And I think in my head that she must have been looking, you know, death in the face, alone in the hospital, you know, saying prayers, you know, about who I would become. And I could have been anything, right? I could have been a little actor, a little business tycoon, maybe, right? But instead, I slipped the other way. In 2003, after just falling into bad behaviors and not really caring about my life, passive living, I went to a bar, and I got into a bar fight, and I shot up the car afterwards. And there's no excuse for it, you know, my mother's absence or, you know, my father not being around or my stepfather, you know, abusing us or whatever he did. There's no excuse. I just slipped through the cracks. And it's hard for me to look at that, you know, and see that. Thinking about my mother and the hope that she had for me, and here I am, going back to Stillwater. And this is where me and Char met, 2016.
Yep, it is. So before my son was killed, I was a restorative justice practitioner, restorative practices, circle keeper in schools, mental health professional, school principal, teacher, you know, all of those roles. And somebody approached me, it was Chris Miner in the Department of Corrections, and Chris has sadly passed away, but she had heard my story and she said, how would you like to join a grief group, a restorative group at Stillwater Prison? And you will be in a circle with incarcerated individuals who have taken the life of other people's son, daughter, whatever the case may be. And at that point, I was only about a year and a half out of losing my son, and I said, boy, Chris, it's pretty fresh. I don't know how that's gonna work. But then upon some reflection, I decided to give it a try. So we had our first meeting at Stillwater Prison in 2016, and I believe it was early summer. And so it was my first experience going into a prison outside of the educational realm. So usually when I went into correctional facilities, and I myself was a principal in a correctional facility, it was in the school part of the facility, which, as you can imagine, is very different from the cells and the bleak atmosphere in the cell blocks. So I went to Stillwater Prison, and I was expecting to be, you know, welcomed as a person who was going to help contribute to the wellness, I was hoping, of the individuals who were in the prison and also of the parents who had lost children to violence.
Can I jump in?
Of course.
And I just want to exemplify how hard that must be to devote yourself to a field of restorative practices and then be tested by it, by losing your only son, you know? So at that point, when Char's coming in and they're prepping us about, you know, what this group is about, they're telling us that we're the surrogates for the offenders or the ones that cause the violence. So we're sitting in because Char can't confront her assailant. So, you know, the idea at the time was to put us in a grief group in a circle. So when Char does come in, she does get greeted with such, right? But it was just not from who she expected, so.
Yes, and the whole idea of surrogacy and healing is really a central theme to our joint message, in that, you know, I couldn't meet with the person who took my son's life. He refused to have a conversation, and it's still an open case in Hennepin County. It's a cold case. And so I thought, well, this might be the next best thing, and I had no idea how powerful it would be. It wasn't lightweight at all. It was very meaningful, very intense. So the program is called VOCARI, and that stands for Victims, Offenders, and Community, a Restorative Experience. And the idea is that there is surrogate healing through restorative practices. And so people who have had children or loved ones harmed meet with individuals who have harmed somebody else's children or loved ones. So we sat in a circle, and we were in the prison, and we thought we were going into a fairly psychologically safe area because there were some therapy-type people in the room, and there were some case managers from the prison, and all of the people who had resided in the prison, inmates, I guess you're called.
Right. Well, and at that time, like, I've been in Stillwater for 13 years. We were responsible for writing the program, facilitating the programs. Everything that you hear about incarceration isn't necessarily from, outside resources. The best type of, healing and restorative practices that we ever experienced were just among each other. So I'm looking at this visit very personally. This is what we're doing this for. I wasn't able, to sit against or across from, the people I harmed. So what's the next best thing is I'm just here showing up. So this circle was an example, and the idea was you'd get 3 to 4 people that have caused harm through violence, 3 direct victim-centered people, and then also like community members. I believe Mary Johnson was in our group. Just wanted to say a quick
Yeah,
thing
thank
to
you
her,
for
definitely.
mentioning her name, Chris. So Mary Johnson is a wonderful woman who's passed away recently, but her son was killed via gun violence several years ago, and she ended up adopting the 17-year-old boy who killed her son. I mean, talk about a level of forgiveness, a level of healing, unbelievable. So we were gifted with having her presence in the group. So I'm going to go through a variety of experiences that I had at Stillwater and other prisons. I didn't know I'd be visiting so many prisons over the years, but a number of prison incidents that some I think are hilarious, some are alarming, some are so sad. But I wanted to share this because I think that it embodies the prison culture in the form of storytelling. So I'm going to share with you what happened. And this guard dog incident was really the first experience we had as a group. So as a restorative practices group, we had a clearing from officers at the correctional facility that, knowing that it's a psychologically powerful experience, there was an exception to the no hugging rule at the prison. Mm-hmm.
And that was just kind of like handshakes and nods too. So knowing that this group is intense, they tried to prepare us for it, but there was no way to prepare for it. So what I did is I ran around and just made sure the main security guards who I had a good relationship with knew what was going on, that it was, this is what's going on. If you guys have any worries or concern, as you see, like the group was set up, there was an observe window right there, and the guard in the bubble knew what was going on, and it was fine. So as we proceed and Char tells her story on Saturday, it really, secreted the bond in the room. It was the first major storytelling of the weekend, and everybody was on the floor in puddles. So, what are you supposed to do in a circle when you hear this story, and then you just get up and you're allowed to break? You're just supposed to stand there and not embrace, right? Like the most natural thing to do is hug. So when Char shared her story, everybody's just, there's no, I'm watching the guard, I'm looking at everything. There's no reason why we shouldn't. So we got up. I think Mary was the first one you hugged. And
Mm-hmm. Mary and I hugged, and a guard came rushing in and said, I just saw 2 women hugging, and God forbid. And he let the guard dog, lunge, and the photo to the right is exactly what the guard dog looked like when he lunged towards us. It was very traumatizing because none of us knew, like, would the dog stop? Were we going to get bitten? We just weren't sure what was going to happen. And we had permission, but we tried to explain that, and he wasn't listening to any of it. So that was our first experience where it was, well, this doesn't feel very restorative, but we're going to give it a go anyway.
And that was him too. Like
that was
that's
actually him.
I found him on the internet.
Yeah.
I don't
well,
care.
He shall remain
if
nameless.
If he sues
but,
me, then
yeah.
he sues me. I don't care. That's him. Just so you know. That wasn't a, that's not, yeah, that's not a, that's him.
So then Chris and I often laugh about some of the indignities, but mostly we want to cry. So the first time I visited Chris in prison, I had received permission, basically, from his case manager, from the counselor he worked with, and so everything was cleared. So I was ready to go for my first prison visit in the prison waiting room. And I tried to go through the metal detector, and the guard said, in a very loud voice, by the way, in front of the whole waiting room, "You have a wire in your bra." And I said, "I do?" I was trying to think, I don't think I have a wire. You know, I think there's a plastics thing. But anyway, he said, "You can't go in. You can't enter the prison with a wire in your bra." So I had driven to Stillwater and was really looking forward to seeing Chris for the first time in a few weeks. And we were very excited that we had permission to visit each other. And so I thought, all right, I'm gonna work around this. So I went to the women's bathroom, removed my brassiere, hung it on a door handle, and went into an all-male prison facility, braless.
No wonder why that, now that she tells you that, no wonder why that first visit was a little like, yeah, it was, no wonder why you were like, I get it,
No
I get a
wonder I was
little bit
sitting
more,
like
but yeah,
this,
right. I get it. No, I was just kidding, it's been great. But yeah, and she leaves it in the bathroom too. Like,
Yes,
yeah,
I left it in the bathroom. It was still there when I got out. Yeah. So then there was a story of the quarter machine, and in the waiting room at Stillwater Prison, there's a machine that dispenses quarters in exchange for dollar bills. And people need quarters, those who are visiting need quarters to secure a locker, because your cell phone, of course, everything needs to be locked up, you know, earrings taken out, that kind of thing. So I watched a woman and a young mother, and she had a couple toddlers with her, say, "Oh, shoot, I don't have any quarters." And I said, "Well, the quarter machine is right over there, so if you have $1, and she did, and it didn't work. So I said, "Well, let me just go talk to the front desk guard, and I'll see if he has change for a $1 bill." And he looked at me and said, "This is a guard station. We don't give change here." And I thought, wow, really? This woman had probably driven, you know, several hundred miles, could be, you know, to visit her loved one. And so that was a real eye-opener for me, because for about 3 months, that quarter machine didn't work. And so people would go there and be scrambling for quarters. Eventually, the woman who had asked me for a quarter drove to a dollar store to get change for $1. So, and that's, you know, probably a 10-minute drive from the prison. Then the location of the parking lots for visiting moms, or it could be sisters, brothers, whatever the relationship, grandparents, and toddlers, is a full block away from the main entrance to the correctional facility. And the people who work in the facility get priority parking right in front of the door. Well, in January, you can imagine if a young mom whose spouse or partner is incarcerated goes to visit him, she has to drag her toddlers through the snow, might have a stroller with her, and it's an indignity and an inconvenience that I could hardly tolerate. So that's something that I actually, when I talked to Paul Schnell, I said that's one thing I would do if I were the commissioner, change the parking.
better parking.
Yeah.
That better not be the first thing, though. All right,
Right, not the first, yeah, that's true.
Please don't let it be the first thing. Let's get
I
that
won't.
after years of other stuff.
Then the next was knee-high boots. So it was January, and I was visiting, and I had knee-high boots. And there was a handmade sign in the visiting lobby saying, "No boots above the calf." And it looked like somebody had just hastily written that morning and put it out front. And I said, "When did the no knee-high boots thing come into effect?" Because it was probably, you know, Minnesota, 10 below, and lots of snow. And he said, "Well, you know, you could put a sword or a machete in your boot." And I was thinking, but I go through a metal detector. Wouldn't that pick that up? But I had to take my boots off. Before I did that, I drove into town again to, I swear, a relative of the correctional community owns the dollar store. Because then I went there to buy some street shoes so I could go in and visit, because you're not allowed to go in barefoot either. Then when Chris and I would be visiting, the guards would order pizza delivered to them during visiting hours, and there are all these inmates in there who have had bologna or fish in a pouch and some unidentifiable starch for lunch, and the guards are sitting above everybody watching us visit, and they're eating pizza. And I just said to Chris, doesn't that feel kind of cruel?
They do that to us all the time. They do it in the units too, so we were used to it, but yeah, it was definitely, and welcome to prison too.
Yeah,
like, Char was looking at me like, are you serious? Like, yeah, this is
Yep, this is prison.
And those were the nicer guys. Those were the nicer guards too, by the way. Like, sorry.
Yeah, and we should clarify, there are a lot of good people, who are in the field of corrections.
Absolutely.
I'm just calling out some of the ones who maybe should be.
There's like 5.
Have some professional development.
Maybe 5.
And then the other thing would be, I'd be driving an hour and a half, maybe 2 hours if it was a snowstorm, get to the prison, and be in the waiting room, and somebody would come out and say, we're in lockdown and we just shut down visiting for the day. So then, turn around and go home. And sometimes they would have locked the prison down before I even left home and didn't call the people on the visiting list to let them know that the prison was locked down. So make the drive, only to turn around. Then my favorite is in August when it was 80-some degrees. My daughter came with me to visit Chris, and she had a sleeveless turtleneck, mind you, turtleneck, on, and they said, you can't go into prison and visit with your arms exposed. And then I was thinking, when did arms become a deal? Wow.
You have handsome ankles. You have handsome ankles. Your ankles are very handsome.
So then my daughter and I drove again to the dollar store. And we were on to something here, I think.
Yes.
Again to the dollar store and bought this was in Rush City, a Rush City Bulls sweatshirt for $1. And then she put that on, and then she couldn't go in because it had a hood, and hoodies weren't allowed. So we again went into our trusty bathroom and tucked the hood into the back of her sweatshirt, and then she was allowed to go in as long as they couldn't see the hood. And then I came one day from church on a Sunday to visit Chris, and I'd had a longish dress on that had a hem slit about like this at the bottom, and they told me that dresses with slits weren't allowed.
It was too revealing.
It was too revealing, apparently, of like the leg below the kneecap.
Handsome ankles.
Yes. So those are just a few. I mean, we have many, many more, but those were some of the things that we faced. So then, to top it all off, another hug from the facility is that I received notice when I went to visit Chris that I was banned from correctional facilities for a year. For a year. I'm actually kind of proud of that.
It is a ban.
I got banned from a correctional facility.
It's a short list. It is, yes. It is.
So, but we do have a portrait, that was taken.
That was. Well, you don't have to go back. But that was the first letter Char wrote. So, and then that's our very first visit. That's it. So, now you know, like that. Now you say that I can't not see the bra. I'm sorry.
What?
I'm sorry. No, I didn't even think about that until just this second. Now, right?
All right, we might be venturing into territory that we should stay away from.
Right.
So I just want to brag a little bit about Chris. So our personal whys have led us to where we are now. While Chris was in prison, he won the Writing Freedom Fellowship from Haymarket Books, Arts for Justice Fund for Creative Work in Prison, the Minnesota Prison Writers Workshop, poetry anthologies that were widely published in nationally known poetry magazines. And then he co-wrote a book called Parameters of Our Cage with a famous photographer, Alex South, who is now in China, I believe, on a film expedition. He also is working on humanitarian projects since he was released, projects designed to end mass incarceration, improve living conditions in prison, humanitarian services in prison, things like school, art classes, writing classes, restorative practices groups, and all of that, of course, during COVID just went by the wayside. And your goal is to expand restorative practices in prison.
Well, thank you very much. And this just speaks to the reality of our relationship as blossomed, because Shar was the contact person for my essay in the Washington Post magazine, and she, you know, just like she did, embarrassing me like that, she got me the cover of the Washington Post magazine. Like, she said, "Oh, have you seen his art?" And the editor was like, "Oh, no, we haven't." And so she got me this award. So thank you, Shar, to that too.
Oh,
Like,
it's
been
beautiful
my best
art.
advocate. Which led to, on December 19th, 2023, so my case came up for the Board of Pardons, and this is Governor Walz. We were just joking back here that, you know, Shar made a phone call and talked to Governor Walz, and then she talked to Hudson and talked to somebody else and got me out, which is true. So what you don't see, you see my family right here, poised, because Shar is sitting in the front row on my behalf, and this isn't the actual picture, but she's advocating for me in front of these people, and they unanimously voted to let me out. So I'm out 6 years early, large part thanks to Shar's advocacy too.
Thank you. So, yeah, right from prison to Florida, right?
To a
To
boat.
Florida Beach, yeah, in a boat. So,
You know you're good when you're in a boat. Like,
Yeah.
I don't know if you've ever been incarcerated before, but there's no boats in incarceration. Like, at all, none. You don't get to see a boat, but if you're on a boat, you're good. Like,
and
that's
no
nice.
palm trees, so, yeah.
Yeah.
But Chris came down and visited me in Florida right after he was released. And so this is our first outing on the water in Florida. So what this leads to is our Minnesota model of school-based youth diversion, which is a project that we have been running now for several years. And it is a project where we're wanting to impact exclusionary practices in schools and to forestall or prevent arrests in school. So we did our research. We actually worked with a Sandy Hook consultant, a psychologist, I guess. He wasn't a psychiatrist, he was a psychologist. And he was a person who had studied, you know, how communities need to heal after an event like Sandy Hook. And he worked with us to help us design a program that would be helpful to students and that would, we would hope, prevent arrests and exclusionary practices in schools. What we know about exclusionary practices is that they disproportionately impact students who are male, students of color, students who identify as LGBTQ+, students receiving special ed services, kids who live in poverty, have housing and food insecurity, students who have parents who are experiencing mental illness, chemical dependency, incarceration, as in your situation. I mean, that's an adverse childhood experience, right? Those of us who are familiar with that particular model know that having an incarcerated or mentally ill or chemically dependent parent is an ACE factor. Divorce, and a lot of that hinges on how amicable the divorce was. In many divorces, things are fine, but in other divorces, there's a lot of conflict, could be chemical abuse, could be other factors that make it a risk factor for children. And then students who've experienced familial abuse, domestic violence, sexual violence, and emotional violence. So we were asking about the face of school discipline. Is this what we want it to look like? And we are the Incarceration Nation. We just are. We incarcerate more people in the US than they do in China. It's amazing. And if you are a kid of color, say an African American male who has a couple other risk factors, you are much more likely to end up incarcerated. And we can see our prisons are full of kids who have those adverse childhood experience factors in their lives. So in the old way, our practices have been and continue to be, in many cases, culturally biased or unfair, reactive, exclusionary, and we've had a punitive approach to student misbehavior in schools. Little acknowledgement of the impact of trauma on the brain. And that started with the zero tolerance stuff. And that never meant to be zero tolerance for children. It was meant to be zero tolerance for certain activities in school. And our mandate was to help prevent those activities and figure out some better ways to help children, support children, but not to exclude children from schools. The kids would just disappear. So where we're headed is, we hope, a better way that's positive and school-wide and restorative. We'd like our interventions to be trauma responsive, proactive, to cultivate resilience, and to have an equitable instructional approach to student behavior. When students are suspended for disruptive behavior, they usually go home and then wreak havoc in their neighborhoods, oftentimes committing crimes in the community. No adult support, aren't getting the services they need. So those who are forced out for smaller offenses actually become hardened and confused and embittered. Those who are excluded develop stigma and fall behind in school. Many drop out of school altogether, and others commit crimes. In several projects that I've been involved in over the years, we were looking for students who were suspended, excluded, and we just couldn't find them. We started to call them our ghost students. They were suspended, and they were supposed to have been in a re-entry kind of program or welcomed to another school, and it just didn't happen. They just disappeared from their roles. The prison industrial complex has unlimited funds to incarcerate young people, but not so much in public education, and we're getting a little close to shimmying towards the end on that one too, because we don't know what's going to happen in the near future with some of our social services and including our educational programs. The price tag of incarceration versus education, the difference is phenomenal. So incarcerating a young person in a correctional facility is almost $250,000 a year, $215,000 a year. The national average per pupil spending for a school district is $98 a day for about 176 school days, so that's $17,277 a year. Some of our young people, I used to work at the Hennepin County Home School, which is no more, but some of our young people were incarcerated for 2 to 3 years in facilities like that. And imagine, if you're not concerned about human capital and about doing the right, compassionate thing, think about the money that we spend on locking kids up. We're going to watch a little video about what happens when arrests occur at school.
In Farmington, New Mexico, a 6-minute struggle caught on camera between a school resource officer and an 11-year-old girl.
Put your hands behind
Hey, let me stand up!
The incident, recorded at Mesa View Middle School, as Officer Zachary Christensen starts filming a 6th grader with special needs.
She took more milk than she was supposed to. She threw a milk on the ground.
He follows her through the hall, later writing in his report that she was stronger than him and she assaulted staff. But this is what was captured on his camera. Then the officer moves in to arrest her.
I've had enough of this. Take your bag off.
Stop resisting! Stand up! Stand
At
up!
several points, school administrators tell the officer to stop.
Officer Christensen, she is not a threat to yourself or others at this moment. You need to allow her to stand.
She is.
Sir.
The 11-year-old arrested for assault, but all charges against her were dropped while the officer was suspended the next day, the police chief apologizing.
As a chief, you know darn well that this is a failure for us.
An internal review found the officer violated the use of force policy, but before he was disciplined, Officer Christensen resigned.
And that video has now been turned over to the district attorney to decide whether that officer should face charges.
Hey, NBC News fans, thanks for checking out our YouTube channel. Subscribe by clicking on that button down here, and click on any of the videos over here to watch the latest interviews, show highlights, and...
Want to say something?
No, go ahead.
Okay. Well, that made me feel old. Helped me up to the step. So the Minnesota School-Based Youth Diversion Model, this is available in its entirety through MACMA. It's one of the handouts that we have, and we'll make these slides available to folks as well. So the Minnesota Department of Human Services earned some funding, was awarded some funding through the legislature, and this was in the form of a grant to design some programs to take school-based arrests and reduce them. And one of the ways to do this was to involve our police liaison officers in buildings where they are present to be part of our problem-solving team. And what was happening in a lot of schools is that the educational staff was turning IEP-driven decisions oftentimes over to the police officer, in many cases just because they were there, And what happened then is that the interventions that were educational and supportive and may have allowed the student to remain in school were not occurring because the police officer was called too hastily. So in this model, our goal is to involve the school resource officers in some of these decisions in a proactive way and have them be somebody who is recognized as a friendly and supportive individual by the students. And we have many wonderful police liaison officers out there in our buildings. We just needed to help support them by doing our jobs before calling them for interventions that oftentimes would not have a good outcome for students. So this is a basic schema of the model, and we go into more detail in our handout about this particular model. But basically, there's some choices. When a student is involved in a behavioral incident in school, we can just call the parents and just say, hey, this happened, we'd like to help you problem solve, or would you help us problem solve? In other cases, we might refer it to a school case conference, which could be a small problem-solving team at the school. And there we have several choices of actions, one of which we hope is to connect the child to a behavior support team, maybe to get a chemical health screening, maybe to have mental health screening and support, or a restorative circle. And restorative practices is really gaining popularity in our state and among our schools, and it's a great way to problem solve, and we have great testimonials from students and parents. Another avenue is to refer to the school resource officer or to law enforcement. And there it could end up in the county attorney's office if it's a really serious incident. In my school district, which is Intermediate District 287, which I'm not there any longer, but I was there for many years, we went from 60 arrests in a setting 4, which is a very restrictive educational setting 4 school, to 2 arrests the following year by following a protocol where we referred kids for help instead of punishment. Thank you. So the purpose of changing our practices is that we know that youth enter the juvenile justice system instead of being supported sometimes by trained school personnel with connections to school-linked mental health supports. We're lucky to have those in Minnesota, and to restorative practices. We're training many, many educators now in restorative practices, and circles are just a great way to problem solve in a school. What we want to avoid is the alternatives to restorative practices, which might mean punishment, might mean suspension, might mean detention, all of those kinds of interventions. So the model has 3 responses basically to student incidents. The first is no action or just inform the parents, and that can be minor incidents that can be resolved at a first-tier level. The second is to have a school case conference or a behavior support team surround the student with planning and ideas for interventions and support. And that can be a variety of things. Some of our projects have restorative practices, others have chemical health, mental health supports, that kind of intervention. And then the third option is to refer to law enforcement, and that's serious incidents only. And I will say that our county attorney in Hennepin County, as well as the law enforcement personnel at the school, was very relieved that we weren't sending every case that we encountered to them, because they had a triage system that was being flooded with referrals that didn't really belong with law enforcement. So when we involve the school resource officer, it's serious incidents only, unless we're calling them in to be a supportive person in the building to help us to reach this child, and maybe they're the person the child connects with in schools, and so to cultivate that relationship. And then that officer would consult with the team. We would, as a team, determine appropriate interventions. And in very extreme cases, the student may have to be arrested because of potential harm or existing harm to others. But still, the county attorney can decline the charges. They can either accept them or decline them or divert the case. So these are our current pilots and partners. We're working with Matamidi High School, Duluth-Denfeld, St. Paul Area Learning Centers and Park Center High School in Osseo, Owatonna High School, and Robbinsdale, Cooper, and Armstrong High Schools. The programs are successful to varying degrees depending upon fidelity of implementation at the sites, and one of the things we're always trying to do is do record keeping and program evaluation to determine whether these interventions are really working. So now, Chris is going to talk to you about his latest adventure.
Well, and to add something about, and we're developing a diversion program too for violent offenses in Hennepin County as well. So it's very grassroots, but like this model is informing that greatly. So, and that's for adults. And this is just, so my first 10 canvases were shown at the Wiseman. You can click.
Oh yeah. Do you want to stand up here?
No.
Okay.
Post-incarceration. And I show this to say that a lot of people, the biggest misconception about incarceration is that we're not in there like feeling bad or like wanting to do better. So I put this up there as like the base of when you mess up and you fall that far and you do fall through the cracks and you land, you still have to get back up. And how you get back up matters. So while we're incarcerated, we weren't doing it to get out. We were doing it because it was the right thing to do. And I put this in there because now I feel like, all them years, now I can, see myself a little clearer. Everything makes a little bit of more sense. And, I feel like when my mother was looking in that mirror now, and as this all comes together, it makes more sense. Me and Char were early on kicking around like how we explain our relationship to people, and I'm just used to saying my auntie or something, something like that, and nothing fit except godmother, right? So we came to the point to where it was like, it's naturally, and now with this, it was almost like a piece to where I understand now that you were an answer to my mother's prayer, so thank you. And here we are just trying to do the work, showing up. So, I don't necessarily know where I fit in, but I represent a group of guys that want to give back, that want to see, success. They want to see themselves in these spots. They want to see themselves doing better than what they did before. So, you guys know, kids aren't evil. The kids aren't, bad seeds are bad seeds, but that doesn't mean anything. Everybody has bad thoughts. So, how do we do better? And how do we help? Last year I came to a keynote and was on the stage and a woman was talking about social emotional learning. And that was the first time I'd heard about social emotional learning. After 20 years of doing social emotional learning groups and that type of work in prison, I came out and she was talking about it, about the absence of it. And it excited me about, because we're here. And so, being on the stage, it's not just me. I represent, a host of guys that are trying to get back, that are trying to find ways to turn it all around and are willing to lend themselves you know, all of your programs, all of you guys, everything you guys got going on, I probably have somebody that would love to work with you, so.
So we're in an exciting era because Minnesota lawmakers have abolished life imprisonment without parole for children accused of criminal offenses. And we have many unfortunate citations of a 14-year-old having committed a very serious crime, but still being incarcerated 30 years later because they were sentenced as an adult. So now that's gone. It's retroactively eliminating juvenile life without parole sentences and directs that children sentenced in adult court will be eligible for supervised release after at least 15 years in prison. And of course, folks who are attending this conference know about brain development, and we know that our brain isn't a done deal until we're in our mid-20s. So many of these people who were sentenced in their early teens don't have the same brain. Their brains have matured. There's been a lot of connectivity in the neurons, and they pruned away some stuff that wasn't very useful for them in their brains. So that information has really informed our work. A supervised release board is required to consider an expert assessment of the individual's cognitive, emotional, and social maturity, as well as relevant science on kids' neurological development. We have also been fortunate in Minnesota to have recently had a statewide Office of Restorative Practices for juveniles actually created, and that is a body that's just being fully staffed, I believe, right now. And we have an RFP out, which many people applied for, to have an expansion of restorative practices in communities, and in some cases to start new restorative practices programs. And we have teams who are evaluating those proposals, who are parents, youth, school administrators, prosecutors, local law enforcement. So a very multidisciplinary group of people working together to make decisions about those grant applications. So Chris and I sincerely hope that you experienced our message as one of hope, healing, forgiveness, gratitude, and possibilities. And we'd like to paraphrase the letter that Pope Francis sent from his deathbed to all of humankind. Make the most of this trial of life and do it now. Respect yourself and respect others. Walk your own path and let go of the path that others have chosen for you. Respect. Do not comment. Do not judge. Do not interfere. Love more, embrace more, live more intensely, and leave the rest to your higher power. And as Brene Brown has so wisely advised us, let them.
Good job. And then we're in a booth. We're in a booth too. So come visit the booth. We're in a booth, right?
Yes, we do have a booth downstairs. And if anybody has any questions or you want to chat, we'll hang around for a few minutes. So, but thank you for being such an attentive audience.
Thank you. Visit us in the booth. Visit in the booth.